Hi guys, welcome to Origin. So as promised, second video, my social justice profile. In retrospect, probably too many questions, but hopefully with editing other people can make their videos shorter than this one will almost definitely be. Let's just get into it. So first question, do you believe in gender equality, and how would you define the term? Yes, I do. Very uncontroversial opinion there. How do I define gender equality? Well, there are many different gender identities, not just male or female, transgender, genderqueer, all of the different nuances that those terms imply. Everyone, regardless of how you identify yourself, should be treated the same legally and on a personal basis. We all have our unconscious biases. I think this isn't something that tends to come up a lot, but we should always be on the lookout for those and try to minimize their effect when dealing with people maybe in the lesser known or well, just the minority groups especially, but to everyone in general. Okay, so number 2, is inequality okay if the inequalities balance themselves out? Yes, I think in practice that's pretty much how it has to be. You're not going to get 50-50 representation across all industries all the time. Not possible. And legally speaking, I don't think there are many policies that would be very popular in that area. One thing I didn't take into account when I posed the question was transgender representation. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but of course any discussion on this should also take that kind of representation into account. Question 3, is there a patriarchy, and how would you define the term? I don't tend to use the term patriarchy myself for the reason that it tends to be a very divisive term. I think it's used in pretty much very different ways. People have different definitions in their own mind as to what the patriarchy is, which is why I included the defining the term aspect of the question as well. What tends to happen, I think, is you have a few people on the feminist side who are they have in mind something that's a bit more subconscious, maybe because you have men in power. Well, because you have men overrepresented in power, female perspectives that are necessary in order to advance women's issues are not heard as often, or in some cases at all, as a result of that fact. So I think that is definitely a legitimate issue. I think there's clearly no global conspiracy of men seeking to rule in the interests of men. I think no matter what side you're on, you're going to only find a very, very tiny minority of people who actually support that kind of view. But yeah, patriarchy tends to have those connotations associated with it. It shouldn't, but I tend to like to keep the discussion away from semantics as much as possible, because those kind of discussions, for some reason, I still haven't quite figured out why yet, but they tend to get very ugly, and they always hijack what I feel is the better conversation to have. So, yeah, again, it's just checking your unconscious biases, and, having more women in power, I think, solves many of the issues we have with patriarchy. Rape culture, I think that's pretty much the same way. There are very clear problems that need to be addressed. In the UK, there was Operation U-Tree in the last few years. People like Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris were found to have committed, in Jimmy Savile's case in particular, over 500 assault cases. I think I'm right in saying that. I'll try and find sources for everything I say, of course. But yeah, I mean, the fact that celebrities could get away with that for 40 years is ridiculous, and something needs to be done about that. But it happens on every level. I mean, you hear about high school footballers and in America, you've got these frat houses, and there's been a few problems associated there. And a lot of it has to do with blaming the victim. Now, there is some controversy even around that, I think, because, and in some cases, when it comes to back alley cases, there's a justification whereby, if you're more drunk, well, if you have a drunk woman and a sober woman walking by, then there's a clear choice of, a better victim for the perpetrator. But outside of those cases, you really shouldn't blame the victim. That shouldn't be controversial, basically. But there is another question here, which leads me to go further into the topic, and is rape dealt with fairly in your country? And if so, what could be improved? I'm subscribed to a lot of people that have made the point consistently that rape is a very difficult crime to prosecute. There are people who, with a straight face, suggest getting rid of innocent until proven guilty in these cases. I absolutely, and I can't emphasize it enough, disagree with that. You should never suspend that attitude. Innocent until proven guilty is essential. It's an essential precedent to have. Breaking it would have enormous implications across many different crimes. So, no, don't go there. It's not easy to deal with rape victims, I accept that. People are traumatized. There will be inconsistencies in their stories if they're not thinking straight because of all of this different stuff that's going on in their head. I understand that completely. At the same time, in order to get a successful prosecution, you have to go through some of these steps. You have to question the victims. You have to, get the rape kits out as soon as possible. Document the evidence as quickly as possible. Just make sure people are on this. Cultivate an attitude in society where it is absolutely not okay to blame the victim. I think, well, I haven't had a lot of time to think about this. It's not. These are issues I don't tend to spend that much time on relative to others, but still, yeah, that's all I've got for now. Let's see. Is there a topic too serious or painful to joke about? I'm not one of these people who thinks we shouldn't joke about rape. I think pretty much anything is open to be joked about. Just, I guess, make sure it's funny. I mean, if you're just trying to get a rise out of someone, then you're just a troll. There's nothing more to it. But if what you're doing is actually funny and has some value behind it, so maybe it's about showing people that they shouldn't be as offended as they tend to be, or if it's done with a general, cultivating more accepting attitudes, I guess, or something like that, then that's perfectly fine. I don't see a problem with those kind of jokes. Let me see. And what's your opinion on trigger warnings in safe spaces? This is probably the one I'm least prepared to answer on the spot, so forgive me if I kind of stumble around here, but Rebecca Watson made a point in a video a few months ago that we tend to treat film spoilers or video game spoilers as being more serious than these kind of trigger warnings, when I think it would be hard to try and it would be hard to argue that they have a greater impact on people than rape might have, for example. And I think she has a point there, but I tend to not use trigger warnings of any sort. I try to imply that the discussion would have these types of topics as much as possible. I think when you've got social justice profile in the name, you you have some idea of what to expect. So, you know, I guess I want to credit the audience with some intelligence, but there are some people that can get caught off guard. It's difficult. I don't have a solution to it at the moment. Safe spaces. It really depends what you designate as a safe space. For example, I guess a rehab group should definitely be considered a safe space. I wouldn't have any problem saying, you know, there are certain things you shouldn't say there. But, you know, I guess a campus where you're giving a talk, or, you know, some kind of conference or something like that, no, you should be able to say anything you want. People shouldn't be struck off the bill or anything like that just because of what they believe. But as always, you know, whatever you believe should be backed up with evidence. It should be informed. I demand that of the people I'm subscribing. Well, I don't demand in the comments or anything like that, but when I subscribe to people, that's I guess a seal of approval that I value their opinions of how well informed they are and they have thought about them, and that's what I would encourage, as always, in people watching the video, and well, in people making videos. What's your opinion on the wage gap? I'm conscious of the fact this is a very long video, so I'll need to really try and get this faster. Again, wage gap's quite a complicated topic. There's, of course, the argument of there are all these studies that say, well, the absolute wage gap doesn't factor in part-time, full-time, you know, social sciences or STEM fields or nursing or whatever have you. There's that whole discussion. I think the absolute wage gap is still a bit of a problem because, well, I guess it comes down to things like well, I guess there are things like maternity leave. If people take those, then, you know, a guy in the same position, if he works all the time, he should have a higher pay. I agree with that. After she comes back, if he's done more for the company, he should have a higher pay. I accept that argument perfectly. I guess it's just about keeping maternity leave and paternity leave equal. It's about having an equal perception of, you know, who's the better parent in terms of child custody. A father should be valued as highly. Yeah, I think those are the key points. What's your opinion on privilege? I see where they're coming from. Again, I think it's to do with unconscious biases. It's to do with the fact that you know, if you have a certain skin color or gender, then you have, well, people view you a certain way, and it's really just to, you know, there is a legitimate point to be made there. I think it gets taken far too far with the concept of privilege, but we should consider that if someone in society has had a less favourable upbringing, you know, just be aware of these things and how they might affect their life, and, you know, how they might see you as a consequence of that. What's your opinion on LGBTQ plus issues? Again, it's all about just making sure things are equal, legally speaking, and on a personal basis. What's the best way to deal with prejudice, and how common is it in society today? What I had in mind here was people just calling everyone and everything racist and sexist and everything like that. I don't think that's productive. I think again, it's when I think these unconscious biases, and that's one of the central points that tends to be ignored. When they get classified as, well, everyone's racist or everyone's sexist, that's one of the biggest PR problems of a lot of feminists when they advance these arguments. It's disappeared on the screen. But, you know, yeah, the unconscious biases, again, is key. We do have those biases. There are definitely problems still to address. There are worse problems in the developing world, I accept that, but, you know, first world problems shouldn't be ignored on account of that. We should just, you know, deal with all issues as they come by, as they're relevant to us, or as we're able to deal with them. But there are these unconscious biases and we should challenge them. I'll be very quick. Biggest misconception people have about me and my attitude towards other people. I'm a skeptic. I try not to stay in one camp or the other. But I think, you know, quite recently I defended a feminist, Marina Shut Up, I think her username was. Well, I got a video response to that in which I basically got completely slammed and I had my skepticism questioned. There was the implication that I'd kind of fallen into that camp and succumbed to my biases towards feminism or things like that. I do have biases, for example, I used to I used to have discussions way back in the day with Lacey Green. I think she's still subscribed to my channel, but I was subscribed to hers throughout. But you know, we had personal discussions, so that there's that history. So there is some bias associated with that, and because of that, there may be some lingering feminist bias. But I am aware of that, and I'm constantly trying to address it. I am a skeptic. I'm not in one camp, and that's the end of it. I always try to be objective. That's the misconception I think I want to address here. Have you had significant personal experience of the issues? No, I mean, I haven't had any experience of sexual assault or anything like that. There's not much more to say on that. Give me an example of someone whose thoughts that you respect on the matter. I would say Noel Plum 99. He's someone who's a lot like me. He tries to stay objective on the issues. On pretty much every video he's ever made, he's brought something new to the discussion, something I didn't consider before. He's very intelligent, he's very skeptical, he's very good at being objective. A lot of the time he does side, I think, a lot with the anti-feminist side, but, you know, that's fine. As long as you're able to be objective, as long as you can have a clear understanding of the issues. And Noel Plum 99, Jim, if you're watching, I love your videos, keep doing what you're doing. I will put your channel in the description. You're a far bigger channel than I am, but, you know, if anyone comes across this, give him some love, please. Let me see, and do you have any further thoughts on the matter? I think just to don't treat the other side as a label. Don't treat individuals on the other side as if they're a feminist, so they must believe this and that and that, and I don't want to hear anything they say. No, there are productive discussions to be had around these issues. Don't let the massive amount of stigma that's become associated with feminism or anti-feminism on the other side cloud your attitude towards that. Instead of slamming other people for being on the opposite side, actually look at the productive discussions we could have, the things that have implications for a better society, and let's talk about these, and let's not get bogged down in the drama, please. And that's the message that I would like to highlight in this video. Thank you for watching. It's nearly 20 minutes long. But yeah, thank you. Goodbye.